a better opportunity for pros to look at me in action and to help represent my school in the best way that I can.
What was your first reaction when you heard about it?
Well, I was very happy that something that I always wanted to play in is that game.
And Terry Greer, I guess a teammate was there last year. That was a big game for him, was it not?
Yes, it was, and he played a good game last year, and I want to follow behind him and play another good game.
Anyone hoping to predict accurately our weather here in the U.S. for the next couple of days needs information gathered from 20 degrees north of the equator to about 75 degrees north, and up to an altitude of about 10 kilometers or about 33,000 feet. For 3 to 5 day forecasts, we need information about surface temperatures of the seas, too, and we must extend our sensors still higher in the sky and south of the equator. Preparing longer-range forecasts requires data from every part of the planet, from hundreds of feet beneath the sea to miles into the sky. How do forecasters get all these crucial air and ocean measurements? We'll find out Thursday night. I'm Dan Atkinson with WeatherBeat. For centuries, man has viewed the weather only in bits and pieces, a storm here, a drought there. In recent years, our view has begun to change. Now we're seeing more and more how the bits and pieces fit together into the whole air-sea weather system which blankets the Earth. Satellites have certainly helped, computers as well. But satellites and computers would not be nearly so effective were it not for the existence of the World Meteorological Organization. Believe it or not, virtually all the nations of the world have come together for at least one global challenge, understanding climate and weather. Perhaps the most important action ever taken by the WMO was the establishment in the mid-60s of a World Weather Watch involving 12,000 observation points at various spots on the globe. These observation points formed the basis last year for the largest international scientific experiment ever attempted. More about that next week. I'm Dan Atkinson with WeatherBeat.
You dog. The only comment Corrections Board spokesman will make is that Hopper was suspended for 2 weeks. They refuse to discuss the DUI aspects of the incident or how, if at all, the incident will affect Joe S. Hopper's future with the state of Alabama. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting. All y'all can go take a flying...
The deregulation means elimination of restrictions on who can be in the moving business, what they can haul, and where. Local movers have mixed feelings on the new legislation. Some view it with apprehension, saying any fly-by-night operation will be able to get into the business and call themselves movers. But others say it will mean good competition.
It's probably going to make us as they say, straighten up the act a little bit and be a little bit more conscious of some of the needs and the requirements of our customers.
One of the major changes the new legislation allows for is binding estimates. That is, when a company salesman comes to your home and makes an estimate on how much the move will cost, that's the exact amount you'll pay, no matter how much the actual move costs. Whether or not rates will drop, though, still remains to be seen. Local movers say they expect no real changes for at least the next 6 months. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
And so, rather than having something that there would be a lot of misunderstandings and all types of interpretations it could put on it, we felt like that this would be the thing to do with it, to have it a good, clear, concise document when it's presented.
After hearing testimony from concerned citizens and nuclear experts, Chairwoman Ann Bedsole says the committee believes one of the biggest problems with nuclear energy is waste disposal. She says the committee's public hearing in October was informative. Several people testified at that hearing that radioactive waste is a regional problem. So the committee is going to recommend that the legislature ask Congress to allow several southeastern states to form a conference. The group would look for regional solutions to the transportation and disposal problems of low-level radioactive waste. The committee is also planning legislation to improve the state system for inspecting X-ray machines. One proposal provides for hospitals and doctors to pay an inspection fee as each machine is inspected. That way the state can keep track of which machines are inspected, and the fee system would act as an incentive for inspectors. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Dr. Williams says he's not against nuclear power. He says he's opposed to the type we use. He says uranium's too expensive, and Alabama should use more coal until the fission method is perfected. Williams also defends his former attacks on the Prattville plant.
Nor have I ever said that this plant could be like a weapon-type atomic bomb. Now, everybody get that straight. We never did say that. Now I'm going to say what I have said and will say, that it would have the strength of 1/4 of an atomic bomb. That's quite a bit. It would push the material around, push it out. Fission products would form, such as strontium and cesium and iodine. These would fall out over the area.
But Dr. Williams' criticism continued as he told the group that the proposed plant has the potential to render surrounding areas uninhabitable. Williams cited the highly radioactive uranium he says the plant will use in the fabrication process as a catalyst for a larger explosion. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
The accident report states that Hopper was driving while under the influence of alcohol. The report says Hopper failed a blood alcohol test. Informed sources say Hopper's test showed .13. .10 is the level at which troopers normally charge a person with driving under the influence. The accident report says Hopper's car crashed through a fence and smashed 3 poles, ending up at the bottom of an embankment off a service road at I-85 near Warish Ferry Road in Montgomery. The associate commissioner was suspended for 2 weeks without pay and charged with negligent handling of a state vehicle by prison commissioner Robert Britton. Hopper reportedly has paid for the damage to the car and is expected to pay for highway property damaged in the crash. But Hopper won't have to face DUI charges. His accident occurred while the State Department of Public Safety was waiting for a ruling from the Attorney General's office. There had been legal doubt whether a DUI charge arising from a one-car incident where there were no witnesses would stand up in court. When Hopper wrecked the state vehicle, that ruling hadn't come down from Charles Graddick's office. The only comment Corrections Board spokesman will make is that Hopper was suspended for 2 weeks. They refuse to discuss the DUI aspects of the incident or how, if at all, the incident will affect Joe S. Hopper's future with the state of Alabama. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
The F-16 is both air-to-ground and air-to-air capable. It's a Mach 2 class airplane. It's capable of sustained flight at 9 Gs, and our primary mission is air-to-surface weapons delivery, dropping bombs, shooting the gun, but we also have a secondary commitment for air-to-air.
Okay, Bill, we're ready.
The concept of junior team racquetball in Montgomery was formulated about 3 months ago by several members of the Montgomery Athletic Club. Club director Joe Vickery says the objective of junior team racquetball is to promote interest in America's fastest growing sport among all youth in the area.
Racquetball typically has been a sport that's been used mostly by adults, and we're trying to get the benefits of racquetball in a team concept that's inviting to the youth and get them involved, because it is a great exercise and has a lot of good physical benefits as well as mental.
The new league is aimed at popularizing the sport among boys and girls from 8 to 17 years of age. Tryouts will be held in January. 45 players in all will be selected from the Montgomery area, and the top 15 from 5 age groups will comprise the traveling squad.
Right now we're looking at competition with 5 other clubs in the Alabama and Georgia area, from Birmingham, Mobile, Auburn, Columbus, and Dothan.
In an effort to build interest in the new league, parents and school personnel involved in physical education are invited to a parents' coaches clinic at the Montgomery Athletic Club next Tuesday night. Registration for the local team will be held January 10. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The F-16 is both air-to-ground and air-to-air capable. It's a Mach 2 class airplane. It's capable of sustained flight at 9 Gs. And our primary mission is air-to-surface weapons delivery, dropping bombs, shooting the gun. But we also have a secondary commitment for air-to-air.
Okay, Bill, we're ready.
Alabama's Assistant Prison Commissioner Joe Hopper this week was suspended without pay for 2 weeks following a November 21st automobile accident. A prison spokesman said Hopper was operating a state vehicle in a negligent manner. In addition to the suspension, Hopper was going to pay for damages to the car and to a road sign he hit. Late this week, more came out when Norman Lumpkin received the accident report. That report stated that Hopper failed a blood alcohol test shortly after the accident, but he won't be facing DUI charges in court. At the time his car ran off a service road at I-85 near Wares Ferry Road, there was some legal question in Alabama about DUI arrests. The Department of Public Safety wasn't sure it could legally charge someone if a single car accident and no witnesses were involved. At the time of Hopper's accident, no ruling had been issued. This week, however, the state's Attorney General's office issued an opinion that in the future such cases could be prosecuted. The state apparently does not plan to take further action in the Hopper incident, however. There was more action in the Hurricane Frederick case this week in Montgomery. Lee Kelo, the former head of the program to provide emergency housing after the hurricane, was arrested here and charged with theft of state property. Kelo turned himself in at the courthouse on Monday. He was freed later that day on a $1,000 bond. Earlier this fall, Kelo's deputy director, Tufi Deep of Montgomery, had been convicted on similar charges. Governor James this week was apparently thinking about education in Alabama. His administration is in the beginning stages of negotiating with the state legislature to have a strong regulatory agency take the place of the Alabama Commission on Higher Education. One of the primary reasons for such a body would be to give it the power to consolidate programs being offered by four-year colleges here in Alabama and bring down the cost of education. Alabama's Secretary of State found himself in something of a controversy this week. Don Siegelman deleted part of a bill passed during the last session of the legislature before sending it to the printers. He was apparently trying to change the measure to what he thought was the intent of the lawmakers. But when he took out 7 words, he stirred up a hornet's nest. Some legislative officials pounced, charging that Siegelman doesn't have the authority to change laws after they've been passed. Siegelman says he wasn't trying to change the law, just protect the intent of the legislature. And the saga of Eastern Airlines at Dannelly Field may have ended this week. Eastern had refused to pay for its terminal space after it left Montgomery this past summer. The airport authority was making lawsuit noises, but this week, Eastern decided to pay both the back rent on the space and to continue to pay the rent until the lease expires. And Dannelly officials seem to think that that's that. Skip Haley, WSFA TV News.
Eight and 10. Excuse me.
Well, it's a project that the Montgomery J.C.'s thought that was needed in this community to help the underprivileged kids have a Christmas that they might not have normally had. And the money that we use for this project is always comes from the haunted house that we run in Halloween.
Look, Herman. Look. Smile. All right.
We have several kids there today that I think they really know the meanings of Christmas, and they just was
overly excited about the type gifts that we had presented to them today.
So you get an idea of what I do. Man told me the other day I tested for leaks with matches. Well, you should see men blowing bubbles. Had in my pants. So I'm gonna let all right. I thank you, Larry. I don't like nobody. Don't touch no light switch, and don't call the gas company from your house. Go next door and call. Now, when you see something like heat coming out of this, out of your vents to your toilet, look out, that might be natural gas. It could be a leak got into your sewer system. And then call the gas company, eliminate ignition sources. We're going to talk about evacuate necessary articles and all like this. And back in Oklahoma City, and man told me up to the civic organizations, so you get an idea of what I do.
We'll be basically working outside of the malls. If we're needed for assistance, anything like that inside the mall, we'll go into it. But primarily, we're going to stay outside the mall in the parking area, on the sidewalks. We'll be working out of our vehicles. We'll be on foot. We'll just try to be in the unexpected places, just where we could be for immediate assistance, trying to see or realize where a potential crime area might be, the dark areas of the outside, just basically to assist the shoppers in and outside of the mall and protect their property outside of the mall.
Touchdowns. Winder set school records for total points, TDs, and rushing TDs.
Working on the thing down there, trying to make it work. Maybe it's working.
Yeah, one of the original board of directors. It's a big day, but some of you may know that
in the field of rehabilitation of juvenile offenders, Judge Don Davis. Representing Goodwill Industries, our sheltered workshop agency here in town, who we have many of our trainees.
And so we wouldn't even be here for the and there's Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Different religions, Saint missionaries didn't do much good. They didn't even believe.
By late Saturday, the sympathy card created by a Montgomery fan had over 400 signatures. The card's sponsor, a local radio station, will send it to Lennon's widow and son. Lennon and Beatle records alike were prominently displayed in most stores, but the producer of Lennon albums, Warner Brothers, is not participating in promoting the records.
Warner Brothers has withdrawn all their publicity and advertising on the John Lennon case. They don't want it to be bad publicity or whatever, as far as promoting his death.
At 1 o'clock this afternoon, another local radio station participated in a different vigil. Over 500 radio stations around the U.S. and Canada carried a program which consisted of a tribute to John Lennon, 30 seconds of dead air, and following with one of Lennon's songs, Remember. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
You got ribbons here? Stick to it. Probably. You just want me to hold this for us and let the car do that. Yeah. You. Sorry about that. Stop it now.
We weren't this quiet November the 4th, were we?
no responsibility.
2 days ago.
First district, vacancy that occurred down there has been checked with the district.
Well, I like to see it in different perspective. The Soviet Union has a very, very much larger army than we do. They have many more divisions than we do. We have a very small army compared to theirs. You can say that if you compare the two, they have much more manpower, they have much more in tanks, and they have much more in artillery, which are the three things that mainly concern us. But then they have different problems, as you can see in Poland, and a lot of the army perhaps is needed to make sure that the eastern satellites are in a passive mood.
The future of Poland and Afghanistan, what do you see?
I'd rather say that the Soviets will have enough sense not to go into Poland and spare the conflict that I'm sure would happen for them, because I believe that the Poles will give them some problems. And I hope for the Poles' sakes and for the Soviets that the Soviets have some sanity and don't go into Poland.
Attorneys for both sides were called to Selma's federal court by Judge Virgil Pittman. U.S. Attorney Billy Kimbrough of Mobile says Pittman, who wants the controversy settled, set a pretrial conference in Selma for January 27th, 28th, or 29th.
He's going to ask that all the agency, that is the federal agency lawyers who are involved in this litigation, be here to state their positions and probably to indicate why they haven't made more progress towards settlement.
The city of Selma filed suit in 1978 claiming ownership of Craig, but the General Services Administration has offered to sell the housing and land to Craig Field Airport and Industrial Authority. Some officials feel they shouldn't have to buy which they claim is theirs. They contend a 1948 conveyance of property clause returned the former Air Force Base property to Selma. The federal government, laying claim to 300 housing units at Craig, disagrees with this contention. Craig Field Airport Authority Attorney Joe Pelcher says a big bottleneck is getting the Department of Housing and Urban Development to commit itself about the property. Pelcher says Selma has been damaged by what has transpired since the base closed. He says the housing here continues to waste away.
It means that now if we go in tomorrow, we've got to renovate the housing almost in its entirety.
Federal Judge Virgil Pittman says he can hear the case in March or April. But Selma officials are hopeful that matters will be settled long before then. Reporting from Selma, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
When Fob James ran for governor 2 years ago, he promised Alabamians that he would eliminate the sales tax on food and prescription drugs. Well, the Alabama Coalition Against Hunger says the governor hasn't lived up to that campaign pledge, and now the group is launching its own campaign to carry out the governor's broken promise. Director Bill Edwards says the campaign will travel throughout the state, collecting 200,000 signatures to show the governor and legislature that the people want food and medicine tax-free. He says at least 41 states offer some type of tax relief for food and drugs. Edwards calls the sale tax on food the most unfair of all Alabama taxes that burdens the poor more than the rich. He says some type of tax exemption probably will be instituted, but maybe not during the James administration.
In order to get something like this passed, you really need turnabout by the Speaker of the House, and you need a turnabout by the governor, that they would really need to be pushing together to get this type of tax reform.
Edwards says there are other ways to increase revenue other than the food and drug tax. He suggests raising property taxes, claiming Alabama has the lowest property tax rate in the country, and taxing services of accountants, lawyers, and cosmetologists. But the governor's press secretary, Chris Bentz, says the tax exemption is economically unfeasible.
The effort was made, but it was discovered that from an accounting standpoint and keeping up with it, it's impossible to do.
Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
Come into play, for instance, how do you...
Senator Mac Parsons endorses terminating the board because he says it would be the beginning of unraveling what he calls the Medicaid mess in the state. Pegues says too often examining boards serve as a tool for professionals to upgrade positions, costing more money in salaries and benefits. And since most social workers in Alabama work for state agencies, Pegues says the higher cost passes directly to the taxpayer. Representative Seth Hammett says since most social workers go through screening to work for other agencies, they have no need for an examining board. He says there are only 17 independent social workers in Alabama. Chairman Pegues tabled the matter until he could learn the effects on those 17 practitioners if the legislature sunsets the Board of Social Work Examiners. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
The control should rely in the hands of the people on a local level for the simple fact that you cannot sue a regulatory agency such as EPA unless they desire to be sued, and their answer to anything they do wrong is, we made a mistake. So you do have some concert and some conversation with the local level because you say, hey, if you do this, we're not going to allow it to happen. We're not going to vote for you. As a resident of Love Canal, I testified in Washington. I fought these people for 5 years, and their only concern was, how about the job situation? And pollution does not make jobs. It destroys them.
I think that probably put me at linebacker. That's where they're thinking about putting me. I don't know yet. I have to wait.
Wait and see, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
You're kind of small, 190 pounds. I guess you'll be working on some weights this winter.
Yeah, well, I don't even think I weigh that much right now. They've advertised that, but I think I'm closer to about 185, but I put on about 10, 15 pounds, I'm hoping to.
Any thoughts about following your brother over there?
Well, a lot of people say that I'm following his footsteps. Excuse me, I think I'm going up there because they have a lot to offer, and it's a nice school. I think it's one of the best in the South as far as academics go, and that's my first objective, is to get a education.
One other thing, do we have the gentleman and all that you said would not hold true? Well, I bet you're ready for motion. We need to put these two. This time.
Social service agencies all across this country report an alarming increase in the use of teenagers in prostitution and pornography. Our NBC-owned station in Chicago, WMAQ Television, recently completed a 6-month-long investigation of this problem. Reporter Rich Samuels, WMAQ's investigative unit, is here, and he'll share some of his findings with us.
Jessica, during our investigation, we talked to many teenagers who became involved in prostitution and pornography, and what surprised us most was that many came from middle-class backgrounds. They could easily have been the girl next door. Here's the story of one. Her name is Kathy.
I'm 15 years old.
Kathy ran from her upper-middle-class family last year. Since then, she's been used by members of a Northwest Indiana motorcycle gang, by a biker who put her to work in a bar dancing and hustling drinks, by a 48-year-old ex-convict who introduced her to prostitution, by the madam of a Logansport, Indiana bordello, and by the hundreds of men who went there and bought her body.
It all began when I first ran from home.
Throughout, Kathy says she was looking for the love and affection she couldn't find within her own family. The motorcycle gang members, Kathy says, loved her for her body, the biker for the money she brought in hustling, the ex-convict for the money she brought in as a prostitute. His name is James Shelton. Kathy became part of his family last winter, as other women apparently had before her.
Sex is our main thing. Boy, if there's a girl out there hitchhiking, I'm going to make a U-turn and pick her up if I can. And if I pick her up, I'm going to drag her ass home if I can. And this is a 7-day-a-week thing with us.
As Shelton described how he recruits young women, he was unaware he was being taped. The scene was a motel room in Kokomo, Indiana. Shelton believed this reporter and an NBC production assistant to be Swedish film distributors interested in buying pornographic videotapes he'd produced. Shelton lives in a mobile home in central Indiana with 3 women who support him through prostitution.
You have a luxury, I must say. 3 women living with you. Huh?
Well, we're one little happy family.
He kept talking about, this is your family, be loyal to your family. You know, we're going to take care of you. You know, and that's all I had to hear, was that someone was going to take care of me.
Shelton's care for Kathy included driving her to Logansport, Indiana, and putting her to work in a brothel called Roxy's, after the madam who took half what Kathy earned and gave the other half to Shelton. 15-year-old Kathy worked at Roxy's 3 weeks, entertaining as many as 20 customers a night. It was a long way from her middle-class home. And when Kathy wasn't working, she was forced to participate in pornographic videotapes in which Shelton played the male lead. In the Kokomo motel room, Shelton showed us the tapes he'd made of Kathy, while a hidden camera and microphone in turn recorded him.
There's another girl from South Bend, the one with her panties on.
Panties on? Mm-hmm.
She lived with us for a while, and we finally kicked her out.
What's her name?
I don't remember her name. Kathy something. She's about 7 foot tall.
7 foot tall?
Right around that.
She didn't fit in your group, huh?
No, we get all kinds of move-ins, and some of them last a while, and some of them don't. Like I said, we don't even hardly come into town without trying to drag something back home.
What?
We don't hardly come into town here without trying to drag something back home.
During our meeting, Shelton offered to provide us tapes similar to the 30 he claimed to have produced during the past year. Some, he said, featuring children even younger than 15-year-old Kathy.
I got one tape of a little pretty mother you wouldn't believe.
Yeah?
And she is pretty.
How old is she?
I think 11. And like I said, this is where it's really at to begin with. We both know that. Everything else, well, 9/10 of everything else is a half-ass moneymaker, but this is a bigger moneymaker, and this is a bigger demand for this.
Yeah.
And I know this. And at times, it's hard as hell to come by. You just have to take it when you do luck up on it and make a tape or whatever. But the one I'm thinking of would probably even be with the mother's consent.
Yes.
So it would take a lot of heat off of me.
What a mother does she have?
Sex is sex.
Sex is sex with you and the kids, yeah, probably.
Well, we've been in it for years. We swear by it.
I don't know what's wrong with him on the inside and how his brain ticks that he has to use women and to exploit them as the way he does for some sick reason. I just think he should be put away.
But James Shelton has not been put away.
He is, however, under investigation by local authorities and the FBI. Jessica?
What is it that we are doing to our children that drives them to this kind of thing?
I think, harken back to the interview Phil Donahue just had with those 4 young women who are at very tender age are being models and put in seductive poses. Society, or some segments of society, are expecting kids to be something other than kids. But childhood is something you can't deny and you cannot interrupt it.
And you pose as a Swedish filmmaker, but your associate was, in fact,
My
Swedish.
associate is indeed Swedish-born.
Excellent report. Thank you
you
so much. We'll be right back.
Anything I say should not be interpreted as indicating that Mr. Rowe is guilty or not guilty, either one. That's up for a jury to decide. Apparently, Mr. Civiletti forgot those things. He apparently saying, I am the jury myself. But in any event, that's not the way we do business. We'll let the jury decide that if we ever get him back for trial.
I believe the latest OPEC price hike is between $2 and $3 a barrel. If you take and average that out over the price of oil, I imagine that will mean between 2 and 3 cents a gallon in Alabama almost immediately, because OPEC price hikes are usually retroactive. So the oil that was bought a couple of months ago still goes at that price. So I think fairly soon you'll see the price going up 2 or 3 cents a gallon just due to that alone.
All of the state's junior colleges receive funds based on the number of credit hours they produce, regardless of whether the credit hour was taught by a part-time or full-time teacher. But the figures from the junior colleges show that it costs less to produce a credit hour with a part-time instructor or in an off-campus class. According to the committee's figures, each junior college received about $28.50 for each credit hour. But many of those credit hours produced either off-campus or by a part-time teacher actually cost an average of $16. Of the 21 junior colleges in the state, 17 have off-campus programs, and collectively the 14 who responded took in at least $3.5 million more in credit hour appropriations than it actually cost them to produce those credits. The committee quickly agreed that there are a number of unknown variables involved, but decided to recommend that the State Board of Education draw up a formula that would weigh the cost difference in producing credit hours. The committee stopped short, though, of setting a figure for determining that difference. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Agricultural officials say $28 million of the bond money will be available by the end of the week on a first-come, first-served basis. The loans, which are available to those who qualify, are not disaster relief loans and cannot be used as such. Assistant Agriculture Commissioner Coleman Sims says the 9.7% interest loans are to be used only for farm expansion.
Now they can take that money and buy new land. You can buy farm machinery. You can buy combines, tractors, cultivators, cotton pickers, or anything like that you might need on the farm, as long as you get approved by the Farm Home Administration.
Sims says the low-interest loans will be available at banks throughout the state. Farmers who need more information can contact their local ASCS office. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The dispute over the Cullman campus involves two interpretations of the law, one saying the authority over junior colleges belongs to the State Board of Education, and one saying the Commission on Higher Education has that authority. After a hearing about the campus, Governor James threatened to cut the school's funding if it didn't get Commission approval. The board had already okayed the campus and refused to ask AIC for its approval. So as chairman of the board, the governor made that request. A telephone survey of board members indicates they may not accept AIC's decision on the Cullman campus. Of 7 board members, only 1 says he'll vote to abide by the commission's decision unless a court says the board has final authority. Other members gave qualifications, saying that whether they accept or reject AIC's study depends upon its conclusions, which shows that though Governor James may want to acknowledge the commission's authority, board members say they do not. And they say they won't yield authority over junior colleges until a court tells them to. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
State Senator Wallace Miller of Enterprise and Representative Jimmy Hawley of Elba say the State Health Planning and Development Agency denied Humana's application because the effectiveness of the cost could not be substantiated. Miller claims the more Humana enhances its service, the more it costs the local taxpayers. He says since the hospital faces a possible Attorney General investigation, the application for $872,000 in expansion money should be denied. Hawley says he's not opposed to business making a profit, but there are questions to be considered when they become excessive. He claims better justification is needed for improvements at the Coffee General Hospital. Hospital Administrator Terry Schaefer says the $872,000 for expansion at the 135-bed hospital would renovate surgery to comply with all sterile techniques. He says the hospital needs to improve its record keeping to expedite locating records. Shaver says a new layout in surgery would permit the hospital to use more flexibility in its service to patients. The Southeast Alabama Health Systems Agency had made favorable findings and recommendations on the expansion. The Office of Health Development also recommended expansion. Coffee General made application for expansion improvements in August. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
27-year-old Diane Gardner is one of 11,000 Pioneer Electric customers who read their meters every month, jot down the figure, and send it in to the power company, who in turn send them a bill. Ms. Gardner's bill for December totaled $4,500, which include the 3 years the cooperative says she misread her meter. Ms. Gardner says since she's been living at her home, no one from the utility company has shown her how to properly read the newly installed meter.
They sent somebody out to read the meters. I asked them why they didn't send somebody out to read the meters if they said I was reading the meters wrong, and they said they couldn't afford to send someone out to read the meters, and they only send somebody out every 3 years, you know, to read the meters. But they explained to me that it wasn't every 3 years, it was every 5 years.
Pioneer Electric Director Malloy Chandler says customers misreading the meters is not uncommon, but the problem isn't very widespread. He says spot checks are made every 3 to 4 years to ensure that customers read their meters accurately.
We found less than 1/10 of 1% of the meters we've changed out have had a discrepancy in the readings that the people have been sending in and the readings that we found on the meter when we go out to check it.
Chandler says his company has already met with those who question their power bills and says another meeting is scheduled soon to ensure bill discrepancies in the future won't happen again. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News, Greenville.
To operate in lieu of
hazardous
the
waste
program.
disposal is currently in the hands of the federal government under the administration of the Environmental Protection Agency. The state officials with the Department of Public Health feel any decisions made in this area should be done by the people of this state, so they've petitioned the government to transfer control to them. Alfred Chipley with the Health Department says his office has already gotten preliminary comments on their request. Those comments include about 9 areas where the EPA anticipates problems with the state plan. Shipley says each of them will be addressed and revised for final presentation. In the actual hearing, there were only 3 comments, each in favor of state control. Of those 3, the most enthusiastic remarks were made by a former Love Canal resident who now lives here.
Hazardous waste has to remain in control of the people because that's who it primarily affects, is the people here. It doesn't affect the people in Washington. Washington's a pretty clean city.
Representatives from the EPA say they'll continue to take written comments until December 22nd, after which a final decision will be made. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
This morning, the Attorney General mentioned a figure of $300 million. That is not correct. It will not be that high. It will not even be a record high figure. But the exact amount, as I said, has not been determined. And of course, since it hadn't been determined, we would want to speculate at this point on what it might be. The why for an E-rate increase is the same as it was when we filed in December of '79. We said that we would have to come back for a rate increase when we put our Farley nuclear plant unit number 2 online.
When does that go online?
That's why we don't have the answer to when yet. It's not been exactly determined. There was some talk of whether it might be the last of March or the first part of April. That has not been determined yet. They're still finishing up some construction, and it's not easy to make predictions on exactly when that will come online.
I understand you to say now, correct? Full-time salary is full-time salary, and 80.
The Residential Conservation Service is a compliance with a 1978 Federal Energy Conservation Act, which requires each state to draft and implement residential conservation plans. Both Alabama Gas and Mobile Gas Service would offer the energy audits at a proposed charge of $10 a residence. The service will also cost the customers who do not request the audit, at a proposed initial charge of 14 cents a month for Alabama Gas and 16 cents a month for Mobile. Alabama Gas Rates Manager Gerald Turner says his company may lower the monthly charge to 10 cents by next October, depending on company costs and customer response. Turner says it's difficult to estimate how many customers will request the Class A audit, where a representative goes to the customer's home and determines, with the help of a computer, how to make the dwelling more energy efficient. Alabama Gas officials told the PSC that a Class B audit, done completely by mail, would be free of charge. Right now, about 330,000 Alabama Gas customers are eligible for the Conservation Service. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
Try to clip it on those coupons off there. Mail it in. Yeah, maybe it'll work. Think I get 5,000 out? All right. I think I ought to get some samples out there. Yeah,
For 2 years, state tax revenues have been falling short of the appropriation to education, and to many government officials, the prospect of education dollars increasing during the next year appear very unlikely. The Education Department has submitted its various budget requests for the next year, but sources in the budget office say those figures are in excess of those revenues expected to come in next year. Through a combination of proration, near 7% growth in the fund, and 12% inflation, the Education Trust Fund has been declining for the past several years. Governor James's press secretary Chris Benn says the governor hasn't just yet tried to guess what education dollars will do in the next year. Finance officials say making such a prediction this early in the year is unpredictable because of the high interest rates and their domino effect on the sales and income taxes which feed the Education Trust Fund. Because of these conditions and what the governor calls a strong commitment to fiscal responsibility, he has been meeting with education and finance officials to talk about what can be done to ensure that education gets the money that it needs and to stay within the expected conservative estimates of what education dollars will be available. Ben says the governor wants to put a handle on what he calls uncontrolled growth, gross fat, and big waste in junior and four-year colleges, and then to funnel that money into areas of education that need it. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
when you think in terms of just money, you lose sight of what that money does. And it's not that we've raised the money goal, it's that we have, again, successfully been able to fully meet the requirements to help that over 100,000 people that we had committed to serve.
Bugs Bunny, Tweety Bird, Sylvester, and Wile E. Coyote have a new home thanks to local Shriners and a federal court order mandating that the stuffed toy animals be given away to needy and exceptional children. St. Jude's Children's Center is one of several local organizations receiving nearly 500 of the stuffed animals. The toys were seized at the South Alabama State Fair in October after federal Judge Myron Thompson signed an order requested by Warner Brothers, who claimed that the stuffed animals were manufactured in violation of their patents. Later, Judge Thompson granted another request from Warner attorneys asking that the toys be given away. Do you think this Christmas will be just a little bit merrier for these special children?
We certainly hope so, because we feel that the whole idea of Christmas is for the children. And anything we can do to make Christmas just a little brighter, just a little more merry, that's what we want to do.
Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
I do not think you could have picked a more appropriate time to dedicate this facility than Christmas time. What comes to my mind and heart more than anything else is to extend to Governor Henderson's memory deep gratitude from the people of Alabama.
Well, a few special guests would like to recognize this head. Major Arnett, who heads up the academy staff, who heads up this.
Class Chaplain, Officer Robert Stanley.
We've added Willie Tullis of Troy State, Kodak All-American Small College, a heck of an athlete. Pro Scouts think he can play 4 or 5 positions. One of our north backs is reporting late. We added another back to the north squad to be sure they wouldn't be behind. We're giving them an extra player. We needed to get the south an extra player, and we couldn't find a better pro prospect, a more deserving young man, and really a better athlete than Willie Tullis, Troy State. And of course, he's got a world of fans around South Alabama and all.
Can we get maybe a picture of
Yeah, we want,
It's hard to break it down in film, and
I've only seen part of one film on them, and our coach has been out recruiting so much, and that we really haven't gotten down that preparation at all yet.
When is the team report for workouts?
Back on the 19th. We're trying to do about the same thing we did for the Sugar Bowl the last 2 or 3 years because we won, and we're starting a day earlier.
Wooded area, and it's on the lake. We have a beautiful lake over there. And they had Easter sunrise services out there, and they said
when he takes these pictures and stuff, is the film not even good once it takes a picture?
The AIC staff recommended a 7% budget cut for Alabama State University. ASU had requested a 26% increase over the 1980-81 figure, but the staff says the cut is warranted because they feel ASU got more than its share this year and because the latest figures show a decrease in enrollment. ASU President Dr. Levi Watkins says he accepts the recommendation, but hopes the commission would give black institutions special funding consideration because of their special mission. For Auburn University, the staff recommended an increase, but it was $2 million less than what Auburn had asked for. Auburn President Hanley Funderburk congratulated the staff on its funding procedure, but asked that the commission reconsider some areas.